shout out to Greg, Big Mad Crab, at the end of all this, and I put the link in the chat already, but you can get this on a shirt. You can get this on a shirt at the Big Mad Crab shop. Hilarious meme. Ah, yes, hello. Come right in to my FBI and
get your shirt here, right here.
Federal government family. I'm not really trying to hawk merch on here.
Would you like a shirt?
Oh, maybe a little bit.
Do you find that your chest gets cold?
So we start with part 6. So last week we covered parts 3, 4, and 5, and that was about the removal of Trump, and I think about some of the Hunter Biden laptop. We're going to get to more of that, but this was, of course, a pretty spicy one about Twitter, the FBI subsidiary, and the amount of communication going on between FBI and Twitter safety and governance, right? Twitter files are revealing more every day about, and this was already like a week and a half ago. When was this? On the 16th, so 10 days ago. It feels like an eternity since he published this. And when I screen capped it, it had 132,000 likes and over 50 million views. 54.9 million views to be exact. Twitter files are revealing more every day about how the government collects, analyzes, and flags your social media content. Isn't that nice? Twitter's contact with the FBI was constant, pervasive, as if it were a subsidiary. Between January 2020 and November 2022, there were over 150 emails between the FBI and former Twitter Trust and Safety Chief Yoel Roth, featured in our meme, which you can get at the Big Bad Crab shop. Some are mundane, like San Francisco agent Elvis Chan wishing Roth a Happy New Year, along with a reminder to attend our quarterly call next week. Others are requests for information into Twitter users related to active investigations. Am I hearing Tara Reid's name somewhere in there?
Maybe? Yeah, yeah.
But a surprisingly high number are requests by the FBI.
Hunter Biden in there?
Maybe. For Twitter to take action on election misinformation, even involving joke tweets from low follower accounts. And I don't have every single joke tweet, but the FBI social media focused task force, known as FTIF, this is really important, this FTIF group, created in the wake of the 2016 election, swelled to 80 agents and corresponded with Twitter to identify alleged foreign influence and election tampering of all kinds. Yeah, sure it did. Federal intelligence and law enforcement reach into Twitter included DHS, which partnered with security contractors and think tanks to pressure Twitter to moderate content. And it's no secret, the government analyzes bulk data for all sorts of purposes, everything from tracking terror suspects to making economic forecasts. Twitter files show something new. Agencies like the FBI and DHS regularly sending social media content to Twitter through multiple entry points pre-flagged for moderation. What stands out is the sheer quantity and volume of reports from the government. Some are aggregated from public hotlines, which is okay, expected.
Here, hold on. Let me put your propaganda on the refrigerator.
Pretty much, right? An unanswered question by Matt Taibbi is that, do agencies like FBI and DHS do in-house flagging work themselves, or do they farm it out? You have to prove to me that inside the fucking government, you can do any kind of massive data or AI search, says one former intel officer. The assumption is that it's not being done by humans or manually. But here's an example. Hello, Twitter contacts. The master canine quality of the FBI's relationship to Twitter comes through in this November 22 email in which FBI San Francisco is notifying you that it wants action on 4 accounts. And I didn't include the whole email, but it is basically ordering Twitter to ban these.
Mad and pissed off.
Yes, sorry. Mad and pissed off. That's correct. And who is at mad and pissed off?
I'm not going to take it anymore.
Right? Twitter personnel in this case went on to look for reasons to suspend all 4 accounts, including @FromMA, whose tweets are almost all jokes. See the sample below, including his civic misinformation of go vote on Wednesday, November 8th. On Wednesday, November 9th. He said that on election day. I want to remind Republicans to vote tomorrow. Right? And here's the email. I've reviewed this already from the TD perspective and suspended 3 of the accounts for multi-account abuse and ban evasion violations. Rodrigo, could you please review from MA for possible civic misinformation or direct to the appropriate part of GET for their review? Like, Twitter cops, man. Literally, Twitter cops, just to show that the FBI can be hyper-intrusive in both directions. That is a pretty good container ship, right? They also asked Twitter to review a blue-leaning account for Claire Foster, who, by the way, of course, was not suspended. Now, she said the same thing, that I'm a ballot counter. If you're not wearing a mask, I'm not counting your vote. And for every negative comment, I'm adding another vote for the Democrats. Okay. And, of course, you've got the FBI. They don't play. Anyone who cannot discern obvious satire from reality has no place making decisions for others or working for the Fed, said Claire Foster when told about the flagging. Of the 6 accounts mentioned in the 2 previous emails, all but 2, the one that we showed you and this one, were suspended. So everybody else was suspended, but these 2 were not. Hilarious. I can't believe the FBI is policing jokes on Twitter. That's crazy. Yeah. In a letter to Deputy General Counsel and a former top FBI lawyer, it's our friend Jim Baker, on September 16, 2022, legal exec Stasia Cardiel outlines results from her soon-to-be weekly meeting with DHS, DOJ, FBI, and the Office of Director of National Intelligence. Okay, I guess Reef's got an audio issue here going on. He's got to plug in. But this Twitter exec writes that she explicitly asked if there were impediments to the sharing of classified information with industry. The answer, FBI was adamant that no impediments to sharing exist. Number 25, that's really important. Basically, the FBI is allowing the people at Twitter that are allowed to see everything. This passage underscores the unique one big happy family vibe between Twitter and the FBI. Are we back?
Yes.
Nice. With what other firm would the FBI blithely agree to no impediments to classified information? Weird. At the bottom of that letter, she lists a series of escalations apparently raised at the meeting, which were also already handled. About one, she writes, I flagged a specific tweet on Illinois use of modems to transmit election results in possible violation of the civic integrity policy. Except they do use that tech in limited circumstances. It's not limited. And they, ES&S, denied that they even had the modems in the machines. That's the truth. All right. Another internal letter from January 2021 shows Twitter execs processing an FBI list of possible violative content tweets. Right. This is amazing. So, in this March 2021 email, an FBI liaison thanks a senior Twitter exec for the chance to speak to you and the team, and then delivers a packet of products. Well, what are products? What products do the FBI produce? Well, the executive circulates the products.
Noriega produced good bricks.
Right.
What?
But these are really DHS bulletins stressing the need for greater collaboration between law enforcement and private sector partners.
God,
on what? The Russian malign influence use of permissive social media platforms, heightened domestic violent extremist threat to persist in 2021, and Iranian influence efforts to primarily use online tools to target U.S. audiences remain easily detectable for now, which is interesting because we just talked about Siphon, right? How would they know that? It's all connected. The ubiquity of the 2016 Russian interference story as stated pretext for building out the censorship machine can't be overstated. It's analogous to how 9/11 inspired the expansion of the security state and the creation of the DHS. Right? And then there's a little bit more about their expansion into what they believe is the Russian malign influence use of permissive social media platforms. My guess would be Telegram and the ones that they haven't blocked yet. He says, while DHS in its products pans permissive social media for offering operational advantages to Russians, it also explains that the domestic violent extremist threat requires addressing information gaps. Okay, which could partially be mitigated with increased collaboration, what a surprise, between law enforcement, terrorism prevention efforts, and private sector partners. We judge these partnerships would improve our ability to detect changes in DVE trends and provide early warning of potential attacks. If you listen to Whitney Webb, and I do, I'm a big fan, she talked about them using January 6th specifically for this reason. talking about domestic
Mhm.
violence and Patriot Act 2.0, spying on American citizens, taking the tactics they had used abroad and applying them domestically. FBI in one case sent over so many possible violative content reports. Twitter personnel congratulated each other in Slack for the monumental undertaking of reviewing them. And I don't want to put the Slack messages in. There were also multiple points of entry into Twitter for government flagged reports. This letter from Agent Chan to Yoel Roth references Teleporter, which is a platform through which Twitter could receive reports directly from the FBI. And not only that, but what is this? Reports came from different agencies. Here, an employee recommends bouncing content based on evidence from DHS, etc. This is government regulating speech now on private platforms. State governments also flag
Yep.
content. Twitter, for instance, received reports via the Partner Support Portal, an outlet created by the Center for Internet Security, a partner organization to the DHS. Why was no action taken? Below Twitter execs receiving an alert from California officials by way of our Partner Support Portal, debate whether to take action on a Trump tweet. Your video was reported by the EIP at Stanford, apparently on the strength of the information from the Center for Internet Security. This is pretty interesting stuff. If that's confusing, it's because the CIS is a DHS contractor and describes itself as partners with the Cyber and Internet Security Agency at the DHS. So they are not a subsidiary, but they're quite friendly with DHS. The EIP is a
Good
series of government-affiliated think tanks that mass review content, a list that also includes the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Laboratory and the University of Washington's Center for Informed Policy. The takeaway, what most people think of as the deep state, quote unquote, is really a tangled collaboration of state agencies, private contractors, and sometimes state-funded NGOs. The lines become so blurred as to become meaningless. And that's really the first part of part 6 of the Twitter files. Hey, look at that merch. But there's more to the Twitter files, which was 2 days later he published a supplemental, which was that in July of 2020, Elvis Chan tells Yoel Roth to expect written questions from the FITF, like we talked about, the interagency group that deals with cyber threats. Now, these are supposed to be foreign influences, right? Questionnaire authors seem displeased with Twitter for implying in a July 20th briefing, DHS, ODNI, FBI, and industry briefing, that you indicated you had not observed much recent activity from official propaganda actors on your platform. Right? And I have this long email, which you can see at the Twitter files. One would think that would be good news. The agencies seem to feel otherwise. So Chan underscored this. There was quite a bit of discussion within the USIC, the intel community, to get clarifications from your company. The task force demanded to know how Twitter came to its unpopular conclusion. Oddly, it included a bibliography of public sources, including a Wall Street Journal article attesting to the prevalence of foreign threats, as if to show Twitter they got it wrong. Roth, who's receiving the reports, circulated them with other company execs and complained that he was frankly perplexed by the requests here, which seemed more like something we get from a congressional committee than the Bureau. Yeah.
Yep.
And what's your perspective on how to navigate? He's completely caught in the middle. He added that he wasn't comfortable with the Bureau and by extension the intel community demanding written answers. The idea of the FBI acting as a conduit for the intel community is interesting, given that many agencies are barred from domestic operations, like the CIA. He then sent another note internally saying that the premise of the questions was flawed because we've been clear that official state propaganda is definitely a thing on Twitter. Note the italics for emphasis.
Yeah.
Right. Roth suggested that they get on the phone with Elvis ASAP and try to straighten this out, to disabuse the agencies of any notion that state propaganda is not a thing on Twitter. This exchange is odd, among other things, because some of the bibliography materials cited by the FITF are sourced to intel officials who in turn cited the public sources. It's like, this reminds me of how they tried to convince us to go to war in Iraq. They plant a story in the New York Times, and then they say, well, look, the New York Times published it. It must be true. I thought this one was pretty interesting. The FBI, of course, responded to Friday's report by saying that it regularly engages with private sector entities to provide information specific to identified foreign malign influence actors' subversive, undeclared, covert, or criminal activities. That's a really interesting quote. That may be true, but we haven't seen that in the documents to date. Instead, we've mostly seen requests for moderation involving low follower accounts belonging to ordinary Americans and Billy Baldwin, of all things, for some reason. It's really weird of who they're asking to censor, but Billy Baldwin got swept up in all this. Hey, look at that merch.
Weird. How many fucking merch things you put in?
Basically between every story. Every Twitter
Yeah, let's not do that again.
Yeah. But then we've got Michael Schellenberger, and he's talking about the Hunter laptop, which is exactly kind of how the FBI convinced Yoel Roth and convinced these guys and set up Twitter and Facebook and everybody else to pre-believe that the laptop was going to be fake before the story even came out. Hey, there's going to be a story that's probably going to come out before the election that's going to be some kind of digital something, but it's definitely not real. They already knew that it was real. Yes, Crab says we need marketing. Mm-hmm. You're wrong. All right.
No, I'm not.
How the FBI and intel community discredited factual information about Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings both after and before the New York Post revealed the contents of his laptop on October 14, 2020. This one has 96.2 million views and over 166,000 likes. And it's not all right-wingers, guys. I promise you, it's not. In Twitter File 7, we present evidence pointing to an organized effort by representatives of the intel community aimed at senior executives at news and social media companies to discredit leaked information about Hunter Biden before and after it was published. Dude, this has been, now again, we knew that they did this, but now you see the emails. You see the actual influence and how it was done. So that's actually the sign. It says, on December 9th, 2019, the FBI issues a subpoena for and takes possession of Hunter Biden's laptop. This is way before the story comes out. So they knew, they had the laptop, they knew what was on it back in December of 2019. By August of 2020, Mac Isaac, who's the owner of the repair shop that Hunter dropped the laptop off at, had still not heard back from the FBI, even though he discovered evidence of criminal activity. And so he emails Rudy Giuliani, who was under FBI surveillance at the time. In early October, Giuliani gives it to the New York Post. Shortly before 7 p.m. on the 13th, Hunter's lawyer emails JP Mac Isaac. Hunter and Messias, that's his lawyer, I believe, had just learned from the New York Post that its story about the laptop would be published the next day. At 9:22 p.m. Eastern, Elvis Chan, who we've talked about in the last Twitter Files, sends 10 documents to Twitter's then head of site integrity, Yoel Roth, through Teleporter. You heard about Teleporter. It's a one-way communications channel from the FBI to Twitter. And the Teleporter is one-way vanishing messages. They explode over time. It's almost like Go Gadget. This message will explode. Will self-destruct in 8 seconds. So the next day on October 14th, New York Post runs its explosive story revealing the business dealings of President Joe Biden's son, Hunter. Except, again, he wasn't President Joe Biden then. Every single fact in it was accurate. May I repeat again, every single fact in that article was accurate. And yet within hours, Twitter and other social media companies censored the New York Post article, preventing it from spreading and, more importantly, undermining its credibility in the minds of many Americans. Why is that? What exactly happened? Well, on December 2nd, Matt Taibbi, of course, we covered in the first one, described the debate inside Twitter over its decision to censor a wholly accurate article. Since then, we've discovered new info that points to an organized effort by the intel community to influence Twitter and other platforms, which we're also aware of. But first, and I'm not going to play this video, but I highly encourage everyone to watch it. It's important to understand that Hunter Biden earned tens of millions of dollars in contracts with foreign businesses, including ones linked to China's government, for which Hunter offered no
With
real work. There's an
10%
interview,
to the big guy.
right, by Peter Schweizer. Okay, that's in the Twitter files. You can watch it, and you can link to it there. Yet during all of 2020, the FBI and law enforcement agencies repeatedly primed Yoel Roth to dismiss reports of Hunter Biden's laptop as a Russian hack and leak operation. This is from a sworn declaration by Roth given in December 2020, where he's saying that since 2018, I've had regular meetings with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and industry peers regarding election security. Why he's testifying, I don't remember exactly, but that's pretty crazy. I think it's during about one of the lawsuits that have been brought against Twitter for censorship. During these weekly meetings, the federal and law enforcement agencies communicated that they expected hack and leak operations by state actors might occur in the period shortly before the 2020 presidential election, likely in October. It's called the October surprise, and everybody knew it was going to happen. I was told in these meetings that the intel community expected that individuals associated with political campaigns would be subject to hacking attacks, and that material obtained through these hacking attacks would likely be disseminated over social media platforms, including Twitter. These expectations of hack and leak operations were discussed throughout 2020. I also learned in these meetings that there were rumors that a hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. Look at how they set these guys up. They did the same to Facebook, according to Mark Zuckerberg. Right. And he said to Joe Rogan,
God, I bet he regrets going on Joe.
The FBI basically came to us and was like, hey, you should be on high alert. We thought there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. There's about to be some kind of dump similar to that. Yeah, they knew it because they had it.
High enough in he's also high enough in decision making at Facebook to know that.
Mm-hmm. Were the FBI warnings of a Russian hack and leak operation?
Direct.
Well, that's something you kind of have to go right to the head. Were the FBI warnings of a Russian hack and leak operation relating to Hunter Biden based on any new intel? No, they weren't. Quote, through our investigations, we did not see any similar competing intrusions to what had happened in 2016, admitted FBI agent Elvis Chan in November. Yep. Indeed, Twitter executives repeatedly reported very little Russian activity. E.g., on September 24th, 2020, Twitter told FBI it had removed 345 largely inactive accounts linked to previous coordinated Russian hacking attempts. They had little reach and low follower accounts. In fact, Twitter debunked false claims by journalists of foreign influence on its platform. Quote, we haven't seen evidence to support that claim by _NBC News of foreign control bots. Our review thus far shows a small-scale domestic troll effort. After FBI asked WAPO about a WAPO story on alleged foreign influence in a pro-Trump tweet, Twitter's Roth says, quote, the article makes a lot of insinuations, but we saw no evidence that was the case here. In fact, a lot of strong evidence pointing in the other direction. Yeah, thanks, Yoel. And it's not the first time that Twitter's Roth has pushed back against the FBI, and he should. In January 2020, Roth resisted FBI efforts to get Twitter to share data outside the normal search warrant process. FBI, ACAB, guys, ACAB, FBI too. Pressure had been growing. We've seen a sustained, if uncoordinated, effort by the IC to push us to share more info and change our API policies. And I think they did. They're probing and pushing everywhere they can, including by whispering to congressional staff. Time and again, FBI asks Twitter for evidence of foreign influence, and Twitter responds that they aren't finding anything worth reporting. Again, quote, we haven't yet identified activity that we'd typically refer to you or even flag as interesting to the foreign influence context. However, despite Twitter's pushback, the FBI repeatedly requests information from Twitter that Twitter has already made clear it will not share outside normal legal channels. Then in July of 2020, the FBI's Elvis Chan arranges for temporary top secret security clearances for Twitter executives so that the FBI can share information about threats to the upcoming elections with these Twitter execs. Give me a break. On August 11, 2020, the FBI's Chan shares information with Twitter's Roth relating to the Russian hacking organization APT28 through the FBI's secure one-way communications channel Teleporter. Recently, Yoel Roth told Kara Swisher that he had been primed to think about the Russian hacking group APT28 before news of the Hunter Biden laptop came out. When it did, Roth said, quote, "It set off every single one of my finely tuned APT28 hack and leap campaign alarm bells." Yeah, they knew it was coming from there because they had the laptop and they knew exactly how they were going to come at them. And they were surveilling Rudy Giuliani, so they knew exactly what Rudy's plan was. In August of 2020, FBI's Chan asked Twitter, "Does anyone there have top secret clearance?" This is what gets really weird. When someone mentions Jim Baker, Chan responds, "I don't know how I forgot him," which is an odd claim, given that Chan's job is to monitor Twitter, not to mention that they work together at the FBI. Who's Jim Baker? This is important. Now, we've talked about Jim Baker. I think we talked about him in the first Twitter files. He's the guy that ended up getting fired, and he's the one that Elon, quote unquote, forgot to fire or somehow didn't fire when he first took over, that had access to the Twitter files and vetted them before they were handed over. What he deleted, still nobody's released. Nobody's talked about if he made any adjustments and what he had access to. That still hasn't come out yet. So why? Who's Jim Baker? Oh, he's just the former general counsel of the FBI for 4 years, both during Obama and the Trump years. And he's one of the most powerful men in the U.S. intel community. No big deal. Baker has moved in and out of government for 30 years, serving stints at CNN, Bridgewater Capital, and the Brookings Institute. So think tanks, big hedge funds. As general counsel of the FBI, Baker played a central role in making the case internally for an investigation of Donald Trump. And Baker wasn't the only senior FBI exec involved in the Trump investigation to go to Twitter. Dawn Burton, who's a former Department of Chief of Staff to FBI head James Comey, who initiated the investigation of Trump, joined Twitter in 2019 as Director of Strategy. As of 2020, there were so many former FBI employees, Boo alumni, working at Twitter that they created their own private Slack channel and a crib sheet to onboard new FBI arrivals. And here's one to Jim Baker. "Hey, Jim, so excited you're here. I'm no longer the newest Boo alum." From Matthew Williams. "Here's a Boo to Twitter translation chart I mentioned." So literally, like, for all the different offices, climate survey, intranet homepage, team topic sites. It used to be FBI SharePoint sites. Now Twitter uses Confluence. These are the different programs that you use. Expense tool was Trip for the Bureau.
Yeah.
Now it's Concur. Personnel tool, you were using EPA and HR Source. Now you're using Workday. 401k, and what you use to access all your different programs, similar to how you were using it at the Bureau. Thanks so much. Here's
Just send that to the Vanguard.
Right? Efforts continued to influence Twitter's Yoel Roth. Seems like they just targeted this guy, and I feel bad for him in a way, but at the same time, look, he knew what he was, where he was, and what job he had, and he continued to do it. In September 2020, Roth participated in an Aspen Institute tabletop exercise and a potential hack and dump operation relating to Hunter Biden. How interesting. The goal was to shape how the media covered it and how social media carried it. So wait a minute. 4 weeks, not even 4 weeks before, but weeks before the Hunter Biden laptop came out, the Aspen Institute literally held a conference where they game planned out what would happen if a Hunter Biden laptop came out. And nobody thought it was
That
weird.
sounds like,
Right.
what was it, South Park episode?
Right. The organizer was
The Aspen
Vivian
Institute.
Schiller. Right. The organizer was Vivian Schiller,
Mhm.
who's the former CEO of NPR, former head of news at Twitter,
Nice, polite Republicans.
former general manager of the New York Times, and former chief digital officer at NBC News, steeped in mainstream media and government connections, basically. Attendees included Meta or Facebook's head of security policy and the top national security reporters for the Times, WAPO, and others. By mid-September 2020, Chan and Roth had set up an encrypted messaging network so employees from FBI and Twitter could communicate. They also agreed to create a virtual war room for all the internet industry plus FBI and ODNI traffic.
You probably shouldn't call it the virtual war room. We probably shouldn't call it the war room.
That's probably a bad idea. There's
no laughing in the war room.
No. So
fighting in the war room. That's it.
On September 15th, 2020, the FBI's Laura Demlow, who heads up the Foreign Influence Task Force, and Elvis Chan request to give a classified briefing for Jim Baker without any other Twitter staff, such as Yoel Roth, present. That's a little weird. On October 14th, shortly after the Post publishes its Hunter Biden laptop story, Roth says it isn't clearly violative of our hacked materials policy, nor is it clearly in violation of anything else, but adds, this feels a lot like a somewhat subtle leak operation. I wonder why, because they primed you to think that way. In response to Roth, Baker repeatedly insists that the Hunter Biden materials were either faked, hacked, or both, and a violation of Twitter policy. And he does so over email and in a Google Doc on October 14th and 15th. Of course, he's the guy that the FBI put there to censor the frickin' thing. And yet it's inconceivable that Baker believed the Hunter Biden emails were either fake or hacked. Right, I had to do that. The New York Post had included a picture of the receipt signed by Hunter Biden, and an FBI subpoena showed that the agency had taken possession of the laptop in December of 2019. My screen just went black. Okay. As for the FBI, it would have taken a few hours for it to confirm that the laptop had belonged to Hunter. Indeed, it only took a few days for Peter Schweizer, journalist, to prove it. By 10 a.m., Twitter execs had bought into a wild hack and dump story. The suggestion from experts, which rings true, quote unquote, is that there was a hack that happened separately, and they loaded the hacked materials on the laptop that magically appeared at a repair shop in Delaware. Right. At 3:38 p.m. Yep. This is the cover story they're putting out. At 3:38 p.m. on the same day, October 14th, Baker arranges a phone conversation with Matthew J. Perry, not from the show Friends, in the office of the General Counsel from the FBI. The influence operation persuaded Twitter execs that the Hunter Biden laptop did not come from a whistleblower. One link to a Hill article based on a WAPO article from October 15th, which falsely suggested that Giuliani's leak of the laptop had something to do with Russia. Russia. There is evidence that FBI agents have warned elected officials of foreign influence with the primary goal of leaking the information to the news media. This is a political dirty trick used to create the perception of impropriety. In 2020, the FBI gave a briefing to Senator Chuck Grassley and Johnson, claiming evidence of Russian interference into their investigation of Hunter Biden. The briefing angered the senators, who say it was done to discredit their investigation. Yes, it was. But the unnecessary FBI briefing provided the Democrats and liberal media the vehicle to spread their false narrative that our work advanced Russian disinformation. Notably, then FBI General Counsel Jim Baker was investigated not once but twice in 2017 and again in 2019 for what? Leaking information to the news media.
Yep.
For real. This is the guy that went to go work at Twitter as their general counsel. You're saying he's under criminal investigation?
Yep.
That's why you're not letting him answer, Meadows did? Yes. In the end, the FBI's influence campaign aimed at executives at news media, Twitter, and other social media companies worked. They censored and discredited the Hunter Biden laptop story. By December 2020, Baker and his colleagues even sent a note of thanks to the FBI for its work. The FBI's influence campaign may have been helped by the fact that it was paying Twitter millions of dollars for its staff time. Yeah. Yep. Insult to injury, quote, I'm happy to report that we've collected more than almost $3.5 million since October 2019, reports an associate of Jim Baker in early 2021. And the pressure from FBI on social media platforms continues. In just this August, Twitter execs prepared for a meeting with the FBI whose goal was, quote, to convince us to produce even more FBI EDRs. What are EDRs? Emergency Disclosure Requests, which is a warrantless search.
Yep.
In response to the Twitter files revelation of high-level FBI agents at Twitter, Jim Jordan, who we're no big fans of, says that he has concerns over whether the government was running a misinformation operation on we the people. Yeah, I'm worried about whether you were running a misinformation for the coach that you were assistant coaches with at Ohio State, Jim Jordan. But yes, I agree with you. Anyone who reads the Twitter files, regardless of their political orientation, should share these concerns. Yes, Michael Schellenberger. But we should also investigate Jim Jordan. Hey, look at that. All right.
Fucking Jesus Christ, part 8. God, I forgot we were.
I told you we're gonna be here a little while, but this one's short, and it's here's the thing. All right, let's go back. Two shot for a minute. Part 8. We're gonna start in a minute. I got a big problem with part 8. I got a big problem with something that happened in part 5, I believe it was last week, where we talked about Barry Weiss mentioning Alexei Navalny. That was my first indication that this has some type of oversight or overseeing of the intel community, and that this is all being allowed to be out, and that we're also, of course, there's got to be a trove of material that is not being let out, that we're still having hidden from us. Thank you so much, Elon. Don't think for one second that we're getting all of this. We're definitely not. I'm dying to see what's actually, being hidden. But we do know that the COVID files, of course, came out today. And we're not going to get to the COVID files today, but we are going to get to this one, and we're going to go get to 9, and then we'll stop tonight, and we'll get to boats. But this is crazy. This Li Fang thing. So, Twitter Files 8. How Twitter quietly aided the Pentagon's covert online PSYOP campaign. It just gets better and better. Despite promises to shut down covert state-run propaganda networks, Twitter docs show that the social media giant directly assisted the U.S. military's influence operations. No shock there. Why is my screen flickering? I don't know. Uh-oh. Twitter has claimed for years they make concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed platform manipulation. Here's Twitter testifying to Congress about its pledge to rapidly identify and shut down all state-backed covert information operations and deceptive propaganda. But behind the scenes, Twitter gave approval and special protection to the U.S. military's online PSYOP programs. Despite knowledge that Pentagon propaganda accounts use covert identities, Twitter did not suspend many for around 2 years or more, and some still remain active. In 2017, a CENTCOM official sent Twitter a list of 52 Arab language accounts that we use to amplify certain messages. The official asked for priority service for 6 accounts, verification for 1, and whitelist abilities for the others. Yes, this is unreal. The same day CENTCOM sent the list, Twitter officials used a tool to grant a special whitelist tag. Remember we talked about how Twitter could censor certain accounts, how they could boost others? This is what they're talking about. A special whitelist tag that essentially
provides...
They
not call it a whitelist?
Yeah, well...
Like they couldn't call it a whitelist because...
They called it approved list, right? Or like, yeah.
Right.
Because of the colored notation, right.
Yes.
The same day, okay, that Twitter officials used a tool to grant a special whitelist tag that essentially provides verification status to the accounts without the blue check, meaning that they're exempt from spam and abuse flags, more visible, and likely to trend on hashtags. That's the boost. The CENTCOM accounts on the list tweeted frequently about U.S. military priorities in the Middle East, including promoting anti-Iran messages, promotion of the Saudi-U.S.-backed war in Yemen, and accurate U.S. drone strikes that claim to only hit terrorists. How are there any promotion of the Saudi-U.S. back war in Yemen. I want to see what messages are that actually promote that and act like it's a good thing that we're behind that. CENTCOM then shifted strategies and deleted disclosures of ties to the Twitter accounts. The bios of these accounts changed to seemingly organic profiles. One bio read Euphrates Pulse. Another used an apparent deepfake profile pic and claimed to be a source of Iraqi opinion. One Twitter official who spoke to me said he feels deceived by the covert shift. Still, many emails from throughout 2020 show that even high-level Twitter executives were well aware of DoD's vast network of fake accounts and covert propaganda and didn't suspend the accounts. Of course they didn't. For example, Twitter lawyer Jim Baker mused in a July 2020 email about an upcoming DoD meeting that the Pentagon used poor tradecraft in setting up its network, and we're seeking strategies for not exposing the accounts that are linked to each other or to the DoD or the USG. Wow. Again, here's our friend Stasia Cardile, another Twitter attorney, replied that the Pentagon wanted an SCIF and may want to retroactively classify its social media activities to obfuscate their activity in this space, and that this may represent an overclassification to avoid embarrassment. Wow, this is just rank stupidity. In several other 2020 emails, high-level Twitter executives and lawyers discussed the covert network and even recirculated the 2017 list from CENTCOM and shared another list of 157 undisclosed Pentagon accounts. Again, mainly focused on Middle East military issues. In a May 2020 email, Twitter's Lisa Roman emails the DoD with two lists. One list was accounts previously provided to us, and another list that Twitter detected. The accounts tweeted in Russian and Arabic on U.S. military issues in Syria, ISIS, and many also did not disclose Pentagon ties. What a surprise! Many of these secretive U.S. military propaganda accounts, despite detection by Twitter as late as 2020, but potentially earlier, continued tweeting through this year, some not suspended until May 2022 or later, according to records reviewed by Li Fang. In August 2022, Stanford Internet Observatory report exposed the U.S. military covert propaganda network on Facebook, Telegram, and Twitter, and other apps using fake news portals and deepfake images and memes against U.S. foreign adversaries. I think Alan McLeod also had some of that. The U.S. propaganda network relentlessly pushed narratives against Russia, China, and other foreign countries. We know about this. They accused Iran of threatening Iraq's water security and flooding the country with crystal meth and harvesting the organs of Afghan refugees. God, awful. The Stanford report did not identify all the accounts of the network, but one they did name was the exact same Twitter account that CENTCOM asked for whitelist privileges in its 2017 email. How interesting. One Twitter account. Interesting connection. Li Fang verified via Twitter's internal tools. The account used an AI-created deepfake images. We need...
Yep. Who are these people?
That's right. Who are these people? They're not real. In subsequent reporting, Twitter was cast as an unbiased hero for removing, quote, a network of fake user accounts promoting pro-Western policy positions. Media covered the story, described Twitter as evenly applying its policies and proactive in suspending the DoD network, which, of course, the reality is much more murky. Twitter actively assisted CENTCOM's network going back to 2017, and its latest 2020 knew these accounts were covert and designed to deceive and manipulate the discourse, a violation of Twitter's policies and promises they waited years to suspend. Twitter's comms team, of course, was closely in touch with reporters, working to minimize Twitter's role. When WAPO reported on the scandal, Twitter officials congratulated each other because the story didn't mention any Twitter employees and largely focused on the Pentagon. Conduct with the U.S. military's covert network stands in stark contrast with how Twitter has boasted about rapidly identifying and taking down covert accounts tied to state-backed influence operations, including Thailand, Russia, Venezuela, and others since 2016, except the United States. And there's a reported piece with more detail, given more access to Twitter for a few days. He signed and agreed to nothing. Twitter had no input into anything he wrote. The searches were carried out by a Twitter attorney, so what he saw could still be limited. Okay, and this was published in The Intercept, which I'm not a big fan of. And Lee Fang started a Substack. Even Glenn Greenwald has said that of anybody that was left at The Intercept, Lee Fang was one of the better ones. But he's still working for The Intercept, and they're buddies with Bellingcat. So this whole thing to me is suspect.
Ew, gross.
This entire Lee Fang portion, this entire Intercept printed portion, the entire Barry Weiss printed portion. I've got questions about the integrity of it to begin with. Others may not. I personally do, and I'm allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, look at that. I'm going to skip.
Not.
This one is the biggest. This is where the CIA gets involved. And we absolutely are sure other government agencies, according to John Kiriakou and according to John, who am I thinking of? Not Pilger, Ray McGovern, legend. He's absolutely convinced that these are CIA. So here's the last of it, and we're going to get through it, and then we're done. After weeks of Twitter files reports detailing close coordination between the FBI and Twitter, moderating social media content, the Bureau issued a statement Wednesday. We knew this. It didn't refute allegations. Instead, it decried conspiracy theorists publishing misinformation whose sole aim is to discredit the agency. They must think us unambitious if our sole aim is to discredit the FBI. After all, a whole range of government agencies discredit themselves in the Twitter files. Why stop with one? That was like Carlin-esque. The files show the FBI acting as a doorman to a vast program of social media surveillance and censorship, encompassing agencies across the federal government, from the State Department to the Pentagon to the CIA. The operation is far bigger than the reported 80 members of the FITF, which we talked about earlier, which also facilitates requests from a wide array of smaller actors, from local cops to media to state governments. Twitter had so much contact with so many agencies that executives lost track. Is today the DOD and tomorrow the FBI? Is it the weekly call or the monthly call? It was dizzying.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The chief end result was that thousands of official, quote-unquote, reports flowed to Twitter from all over through the FITF and the FBI's San Francisco field office. We know about Elvis Chan. On June 29, 2020, he wrote to a pair of Twitter execs asking if he could invite an OGA to an upcoming conference. OGA, or other government organization, or other government agency.
Damn.
Right? Can be euphemism for CIA, according to multiple former intel officials and contractors. Chuckles one, they think it's mysterious, but it's just conspicuous. Ray McGovern says, other government agency, the place where I worked for 27 years. Retired CIA officer Ray McGovern. It was an open secret.
Ray McGovern, yeah.
Right. It was an open secret at Twitter that one of its executives was ex-CIA, which is why Chan referred to that executive's former employer. First Twitter executive abandoned any pretense to stealth and emailed that the employee used to work for CIA, so that's Elvis's question. Senior legal executive Stasia Cardile, who keeps coming up, whose alertness stood out among Twitter leaders, replied, I know, and I thought my silence was understood. She then passes on conference details to recently hired ex-FBI lawyer Jim Baker. But I invited the FBI and CIA virtually, and the CIA virtually will attend too, she says to Baker, adding pointedly, no need for you to attend.
Like they don't do that already.
Right. No need for you to attend. I love that.
The CIA virtually attend everything.
Because they're listening all the time. The government.
Yeah, they're like Jesus.
Okay, number 16. The government was in constant contact, not just with Twitter, but with virtually every major tech firm. These included Facebook, Microsoft, Verizon, Reddit, even Pinterest, and many others.
Mm-hmm.
Industry players also held regular meetings without government. One of the most common forums was a regular meeting of the multi-agency FITF, attended by spates of executives, FBI personnel, and nearly always one or two attendees marked OGA. Mysterious. And there's one of the emails that's sent out to everybody, classifying them literally as OGA. Oh, I missed something there. The FITF meeting agenda is virtually always included at or near the beginning an OGA briefing, usually about foreign matters. Hold that thought. Despite its official remit being foreign influence, the FITF and San Francisco FBI office became conduit for mountains of domestic moderation requests from state governments, even local police. Many requests were arrived via teleporter, like we talked about, a one-way platform in which many communications were timed to vanish. Especially as the election approached in 2020, the FITF FBI overwhelmed Twitter with requests, sending lists of hundreds of problem accounts. We knew this. Email after email came from the San Francisco office heading into the election, often adorned with an Excel attachment. There were so many government requests, Twitter employees had to improvise a system for prioritizing and triaging them. And the FBI was clearly tailoring searches to Twitter's policies. FBI complaints were almost always depicted somewhere as possible terms of service violation, even in the subject line, which was weird. They show an email from Elvis Chan to Yoel Roth with it. Twitter executives even noticed that the FBI appeared to be assigning personnel to look for Twitter violations. Like I said, Twitter cops. Quote, they have some folks in the Baltimore field office and at HQ that are just doing keyword searches for violations. This is probably the 10th request I've dealt with in the last 5 days, remarked Stasia. And she's saying this to Jim Baker. And of course he knew this. Even ex-FBI lawyer Jim Baker agreed. Odd that they're searching for violations of our policies. Yeah, sure it's odd. The New York FBI office even sent requests for the user IDs and handles of a long list of accounts named in a Daily Beast article. I think Max Blumenthal and some others, senior executives, say they are supportive and completely comfortable doing so. It seemed to strike no one as strange that a foreign influence task force was forwarding thousands of mostly domestic reports along with DHS about the fringiest material. Foreign meddling had been the ostensible justification for expanded moderation since platforms like Twitter were dragged onto the Hill by the Senate in 2017. Yet behind the scenes, Twitter execs struggled against government claims of foreign influence supposedly occurring on their platform and others. Yeah. Twitter files show execs under constant pressure to validate theories of foreign influence and unable to find evidence for key assertions. Basically, they're making up the crimes, which never happened. Twitter's saying they didn't find them, and they're like, no, you have to look for them, you have to find them. Found no links to Russia, says one analyst, but suggests he could brainstorm to find a stronger connection. And what he's talking about is, after I reviewed the accounts, found no links to Russia, I asked blank so-and-so on this ticket. This was his answer. Thanks for tagging in the workflow. From my checks, I couldn't find any indicators to suggest that the account is Russian. Even the other phone-linked accounts doesn't have indicators to suggest it's a Russian proxy. Did checks of via domain tools for IP resolves and email checks for OSINT. However, going by the content and narrative coming from the account is definitely pro-Russian or could be a Russian proxy. I can brainstorm with so-and-so and see if we can dig even deeper and find a stronger connection. They're now inventing Russians. Extremely tenuous circumstantial evidence of being related, says another. No real matches using the info, says Yoel Roth in another case, noting some links were clearly Russian, but another was a house rental in South Carolina. In another case, Roth concludes a series of Venezuelan pro-Maduro accounts are unrelated to Russia's Internet Research Agency because they're too high volume. It's really weird. Like, they're trying to pin this on everybody that's anywhere remotely. Look, it's Venezuelans who are connected to the Russians. It's always Russians. The Venezuelans were extremely high-volume tweeters, pretty uncharacteristic of a lot of the other IRA activity, which is what Roth said and identified. In a key email, news that the State Department was making a wobbly public assertion of Russian influence led an exec, the same one with the OGA pass, to make a damning admission. Quote, Due to a lack of technical evidence on our end, I've generally left it be, waiting for more evidence, he says. Our window on that is closing, given that the government partners are becoming more aggressive on attribution. I'm going to go ahead with suspension and mark the domain as unsafe. That's what he says in the email here. Rebel Inside was a new one for me too. Not even sure what the goal of the account could possibly be, other than to highlight unrest in other areas of the world besides Russia. I've already suspended it and marked its domain as unsafe. Like, again, Twitter cops. Translation: more aggressive government partners had closed Twitter's window of independence. Other government agencies ended up sharing intelligence through the FBI and FITF, not just with Twitter, but with Yahoo, Twitch, Cloudflare, LinkedIn, even Wikimedia. Yes, Wikipedia, which we know has been editing the Gray Zones page and other lefty and anti-imperialist pages. And they're in bed with the intel state. Former CIA agent and whistleblower John Kiriakou believes he recognizes the formatting of these reports. He says, it looks right on to me, noting that what was cut off above the tear line was the originating CIA office and all the copied offices. Many people wonder if internet platforms receive direction from intel agencies about moderation, policy, foreign policy news stories. It appears Twitter did, in some cases, by way of the FITF and FBI. These reports are far more factually controversial than their domestic counterparts. And this one I know Max Blumenthal even shared. One intel report lists accounts tied to Ukraine neo-Nazi propaganda, except it's not propaganda, it's real. This includes assertions that Joe Biden helped orchestrate a coup in 2014, no, Victoria Nuland did, and put his son on the board of Burisma. Somebody put him on the board of Burisma, unqualified. Another report asserts...
Hold on. One till list accounts tied to Ukraine neo-Nazi propaganda. Okay, so yeah, the Maidan coup, they fucking gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They're denying that Maidan happened. They're denying any of it, and they're saying that Biden had nothing to do with it, and that just the opposite. He was trying to prevent that, which we know. He had a hunter get the gig. Another report asserts a list of accounts accusing the Biden administration of corruption in vaccine distribution are, again, part of a, of course, Russian influence campaign. They're constantly priming all these intel agencies to be anti-Russian. How about the fact that they're spying on behalf of the U.S. government on every other foreign government in the world? Nobody's even mentioning that. Like, this just became, like, Twitter is a global company, but yet they are basically a tool of the U.S. intel community. Often intelligence came in the form of brief reports, followed by long lists of accounts simply deemed to be pro-Maduro, pro-Cuba, pro-Russia, etc. This one batch had over 1,000 accounts marked for digital execution. I'm sure some of our friends were in there. Because the Tragedy of Donbass, DonbassTragedy.info, a website documenting the purported human rights abuses committed by Ukrainians since 2014, is directed by GRU, Russian Intel. Oh, that wasn't really happening. Okay. Intel about the shady...
Go back.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go back. I'm trying to remember, what was it called? Go back one more. Must have missed it. You said a thing.
Talking about this?
One more. Go the other way. The other way.
Documenting purported. Yeah, again, this is the website. Tragedy of Donbass. DonbassTragedy.info.
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. That's what caught my. That was it.
So
the tragedy of the Donbass.
Often intel reports are just long lists of newspapers, tweets, or YouTube videos guilty of anti-Ukraine narratives. That's definitely us. Definitely Gray Zone. Definitely everybody in the Indie Media Awards. Sometimes, and not always, Twitter and YouTube block the accounts, but now we know for sure what Roth meant by the Bureau and by extension the IC. He wasn't just dealing with the Bureau. The line between misinformation and distorting propaganda is thin. Again? The what?
I forget. The BAM? BAM? I was doing a
No,
thing a minute ago.
I don't know what you're talking about. But the line between misinformation and
more?
distorting propaganda, this is it, is thin. Are we comfortable with so many companies receiving so many reports from a more aggressive government and other government agencies, by the way? CIA has yet to comment on the nature of its relationship to tech companies like Twitter, nor will it ever. Twitter had no input into anything I did or wrote. Searches were carried out by third parties, so what I saw could be limited. Same thing, Matt Taibbi. All right, I'm exhausted. I'm done talking. But I wanted to show this. Under the first, and this was published the other night.
Never mind. Yeah.
Under the First Amendment, government cannot work with tech companies to censor people for expressing disfavored viewpoints. It's important to correct a common misconception that has been percolating, as has become apparent to her, Jenin Yoons, whose Lefty Lockdowns won, through a number of conversations. First of all, government coercing and pressuring private companies to engage in viewpoint discriminatory censorship is obviously First Amendment violative. The government cannot threaten private entities so as to accomplish what it can't directly. That tech companies are operating under duress is obvious, given public statements from officials such as Jen Psaki, Vivek Murthy, and Biden himself. They're killing people. We will hold them accountable. Given the power imbalance, these threats are inherently coercive. We also know the companies operated under pressure from internal Twitter emails, such as those exposed by Alex Berenson's lawsuit, and exchanges between Murthy and Facebook executives. Claim that companies want to help government falls flat in these circumstances. However, assuming for the sake of argument that it's consensual, it's still unlawful under the First Amendment. The government cannot outsource what would be unconstitutional conduct to non-government actors. That should be obvious, but appears to be so to disturbingly few. The government cannot hire a private company to search your home without probable cause and a warrant. Likewise, government shouldn't be able to pay, persuade, or collude with private companies to engage in conduct that is a First Amendment violation when performed by the government. All right. And before we sign off, shout out to Big Mad Crab. Go check out his store. And here's his Twitter Files hoodie, pullover hoodie with Elon's face and his angry bird. And finally, here's the Yoel Roth Twitter HQ meme shirt.